I thought I might give you a little insight into United States government work that exceeds top secret. There's three classifications in the military: confidential, secret, and top secret. Confidential can be had pretty easily. We basically just do a quick check of your hometown newspaper and trust you. It isn't with much, so it doesn't matter. However, when they do a top secret clearance on you, they actually do send people to your hometown to interview your high school principals, look through newspapers, talk to next door neighbors. And when you go for a top secret, it even gets worse than that. I once saw my jacket on security one time, and they had newspaper clippings from my third grade square dance competition down to the person who was my partner for the square dance. Now, once you get your top secret clearance, if you need anything above that, it's done on a piece by piece basis. In other words, there's tags, what we call tags. You got a top secret clearance, but you've got a crypto tag for a certain device. It isn't for all cryptographic devices. It's for individual ones. So this was the airplane I worked on in the military. So you can well imagine you can even walk into the door of this airplane without a top secret clearance because it's an airborne early warning combat command and control platform. It's stuffed full of electronics, advanced electronics. By the way, look at the fixed wire antenna. It's coming from just in front of this rudder over here up to in front of the vapor cycle intake, going back to this rudder over here, and then it's going into the side of the plane here where it comes out of the box. So that antenna goes from here to here to here to that other rudder. Now there's a trailing wire antenna. Might be able to see it just in this picture. I don't know. That looks like the end of the tail hook instead of the trailing wire drogue. There's a piece of lead on the back of the airplane. When they let out the trailing wire antenna, it just comes out the back and starts extending out on a little electric reel, and it extends out the length it needs to for whatever frequency you're operating at. And then it sits behind the airplane the whole time and kind of spins in a little circle like this straight behind the airplane. We actually had no, that's the tail hook. You can't see the trailing wire drogue in this. We actually had one of our airplanes, when the tail hook comes down and if the fixed wire antenna is out, it's supposed to guillotine the fixed wire antenna because the clunk on the end of it, the drogue so to speak, is actually a piece of lead that weighs about 10 pounds. Not good to be dragging a 50-yard cable behind you with 10-pound weight on it when you land on the deck of an aircraft carrier. But during my deployment, we actually had one fail to guillotine, and I haven't had those Super 8 movies converted to file yet, or digitized so they can be on my computer. But I've got a video of our airplane coming in, and the drogue did not get guillotined. And as our plane hits the deck, you can see the drogue come into view, bounce on the deck right below this prop, bounce up in the air and over the side. Wasn't the intent of this video, but I saw a lot of things in this squadron for 3 years. The airplane itself has five, two pilots, okay, a pilot and a co-pilot, and three people in the back, a radio operator, an air control operator, and a combat information operator. So there's three seats in the back, and they're sitting sideways in the fuselage. And as you can see, this is the array of buttons and switches around them. This is a screen here for radar. This screen down here does all sorts of things. You can hook a aircraft on this screen up here with the light pin, and we used light pins back in the 70s. This little screen down here will display the information about the target you hooked from the Jane's Book of Fighting Ships, if it's a surface contact or subsurface contact. If it's an aerial contact, it will show you the information from the Jane's Book of Fighting Aircraft. In other words, the deepest detail we have on those targets that there is. So you can well imagine, I had to know what every switch here did, and I had to keep it all running. I had to know what was connected in this compartment to what box in the front, so I could do my work to keep all the electronics running. So let's get down to the basis for this video. And this is, you can see better right here where that fixed wire antenna comes out of the side of the aircraft, where it's hooked to the radio, goes up to the rudder, up to the front, and back to the other rudder. That's the new D. It actually has a refueling probe. Again, I digress. More of the back compartment. This is the C that I did work on. Some of these other pictures of the D, I don't know anything about it. And you can see this was our light pin, a really clunky piece of junk. The end actually depressed in, that's how you clicked it, but there was actually a light, and the mask on the scope had a lighted, graduated grid on it, and this pin could see where it was looking at the grid when you hooked a target. Anyway, you can see here boxes again. I can see things in that picture that were top secret or beyond when I was in the squadron. These are control boxes for some of the radios. That's not some of the bad stuff. But as you might well imagine, new ones have 8 bladed props, whereas we had these 4. Ours weren't rounded on the end either. They were quite sharp. So, let me tell you about one little box real quick, and some of my experience. This was exactly our props. You can see they're square on the ends. Much more dangerous. What the hell? They started making them a little more safe after I was discharged. By the way, just another little story. The external power plugs into the aircraft. Right behind this is another part of the vapor cycle, which is the cooling system for the electronics. During takeoffs and stuff, when we powered up the airplanes and stuff, after the engines got spinning real good and the generators in the airplane itself were generating power for the electronics and stuff, it was my shop's job to go in, and part of my job to go in and pull that electrical power out of that airplane on a launch, which was real close to these props when they're spinning at their full 10,000 RPMs. And one day I had moved outboard of the engine in this area to stand and wait for the plane directors to take the airplane away from our squadron to launch it on the flight deck. And A pilot officer came out of the island and started to walk right through this prop. And I just barely got to him quick enough, and I grabbed him by the seat of the pants, right where all the nylon webbing comes together on a flight suit, so I knew I wasn't going to lose him. And I jerked him backwards about 3 feet. He turned around to start chewing me out. I just looked at the prop and pointed my finger 2 or 3 times. He turned around, finally saw the prop, turned white as a ghost. Didn't say another word, walked back in the island and closed the door. I never saw him again. I've got hundreds of stories, months and months of working with this airplane. Anyway, one of the items that required above a top secret clearance was this device right here. It's called a KY-28. I am not going to tell you anything that isn't revealed in this document. This has all been declassified. That's why it's up. You can even go to the cryptography museum for the military and physically see these devices. This device encrypted voice communications, and it did so. Right here's a door on the front of it. And this door closes. It has a couple of purposes. It closes to cover all of these holes. These holes are where it's programmed. When the door closes to protect those holes, which is done just after keying the device for the code of the day, it also trips a little switch, mechanical switch in here, that causes the next opening of this door to reset all of these switches that are behind these holes. Also, on a hard landing, it can reset those switches because it thinks somebody messed with those doors. We had a little trouble with that. Normally, we would rekey these devices at midnight, and then at one point it became 6 o'clock in the morning, which didn't matter to me. My shift was 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., so it didn't matter if it was midnight or 6 in the morning. I was the guy. There were 2 enlisted guys in our squadron with the crypto KY-28 tag on their top secret clearances. There were 2 officers in the squadron with KY-28 crypto tags on their top secret clearance. One officer was the main crypto officer. The second officer was the electronics department officer over my department. And then there were 2 of us in that department, one on the day shift, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and me on the night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. That gun, that device is coded and keyed with a gun. It's actually sitting right here on top of it, but you can't see much about it in this picture. That is done. This is the Wikipedia. Again, I wouldn't be telling you this if it was still even confidential. It's not anymore. This is that KY-28 device. This is the door open. This is the gun that goes in to those holes, and then this depresses to push in the slides in those holes to code this. You can see it better in this picture. There are four rows of fingers in this device. Now here's the interesting part. The KY-28s, of course, there were 2 of them, in case you wanted to do relay on 2 UHS or 2 HF radios. That meant that the airplane, the fighter jet, was too far from the ship to talk to it. Therefore, we would take 2 radios, set one up on the ship's frequency, set one up on the fighter's frequency, and pair them together so that the fighter could key, go in one of our radios, out one of our radios, and to the ship without us listening in. Even though this was encrypted, we didn't. Sometimes they didn't want us to know, even though we're command and control. A lot of compartmentalizing in the military with secret stuff. This gun was stored. This is finally the part of the story that's a little interesting and humorous. This gun was stored in a safe in our ready room on the aircraft carrier. The four of us with the KY-28 tag had the code to unlock the safe. On times when I would key the airplanes, I would go down to the Marine detachment, which is in the forward part of the ship, and I would requisition a Marine. I would actually take a clipboard and sign for a Marine. And on the clipboard were certain columns of what I wanted the Marine for and what our ready room number was. We were in ready room 9, I think it was, if I remember right. So I would, the duty Marine, standing in the area where we would requisition them, which was just above the compartment they slept in too, would hand me the keyboard, and I would write down my name, my ready room number, and what I needed. Escort for top secret device. And then I would go back to the ready room, which generally the enlisted guys didn't go in the ready room much. We did at night for the movies. Even sometimes some of us that were well behaved, so to speak, were let into the officers' movie so we could view the early movie and go ahead and get in the rack and get some sleep, while the other enlisted men later would have to wait and go to the enlisted. But that was part of seniority within the squadron. We didn't generally go in that ready room during the day unless we had business in there. It's where all the officers hung out when they didn't have flights. So I would go in there and sit in the ready room, and the officers in there knew I was there. And at some point, the Marine would come. He would go from where I requisitioned him to the armory, and he would get a .45 sidearm and a sawed-off pump shotgun, and then he would come to the ready room with all of that. And, of course, all the live rounds to go with it. When he came to the ready room, I would stand up and inform the room that it had to be emptied. I wouldn't even tell them why. They knew that I had the right to do that. So did my counterpart on day. So did my two officers with the KY-28 tags. When the ready room was emptied and the Marine was posted up outside the door ready to shoot anybody that tried to get around him to me, I would open the safe, take out the guns for the KY-28s. I'm not going to tell you about them in this because I don't know if they're declassified. There were other things in there that had to be keyed along with these guns for other devices. And then I would close the safe, open the door, and tell the Marine we're ready. He knew exactly where we were going. For starters, we were going to Combat Information Center for the ship. Combat Information Center is the most secure area on the ship. Nuclear weapons storage may be a little more secure. But there were very, of the 7,000 people on the ship when I was doing my cruises, I doubt 20 of them were authorized to be in CIC. It just was a place you did not go. I had the combination to the cyber lock for the door. I didn't even have to knock on the door when I got there. The Marine would post up outside the door because he couldn't go in there. I would run the cipher lock on the door, open the door. Right on the other side of the door, the duty officer would be, and I would ask him for the code books for today. On the slides on this, when this gun is opened, you open this gun, it folds in half. This little latch right here, you flip it, it folds into two pieces with two rows of pins on each side. Inside the gun are notches labeled A through Z for each one of the pins. There's like 40, 60 in there. I've never counted them. And what you did, you sat there at the table and you'd go to slider number 1 and set it for F. Slider number 2, set it for Z. Slider number 3, set it for H. Slider number 4, set it for A. Whatever was proper for each one of those sliders for the code of the day. That would, the fighter jets had to have the same code as we do in these boxes to get proper communication. These pins do not actually stick out of this like this. They only stick out like this when the back part of this gun is pushed forward. These 4 pins are alignment pins. Along with these 2 alignment pins, they're fixed. They don't move. The sliders actually move, and when this gun is just in its normal position, there's holes in the front of this, but you can't see any of the rods sticking out. And what happens is, that's a KY-38. And what happens after that gun is pushed flush with the box itself, and the back of this is pushed forward, you can see the hinge right there that hinges those 2 halves that open. When the gun is pushed forward, you can see all those sliders are inside that box, and they all go in those little holes, and they push the variable resistors inside there, variable capacitors. I'm not going to tell you about the circuitry inside this box either. To their position for today. Remove the gun, close the door. So after the guns were keyed, I would come out of the CIC, and while I was in there, boy, I've seen some things in there. While I was doing my thing with the guns in the corner, I could look up at the main board where all the big wigs were in there, admirals and stuff, captains, admirals. We're in there looking at the situation board about what was going on and making decisions. It was a wild room, especially in 1973 during the Israeli crisis. Some of the things I saw in that room, I'll probably never talk about. So I would give the officer of the day in CIC back the code books, and he'd lock them back in his safe, and I'd say, see you tomorrow. Thank you, bye. And I would leave. And me and the Marine would go to the flight deck. I would stick my head in the door and tell anybody in the airplane they had to get out. Once the airplane was empty, the Marine would post up outside, and I would go in and key the particular boxes. Now, if anybody touched me, tried to get those physical devices away from me or whatever during that process, that Marine was supposed to shoot them and then ask later why they did that. Again, this is the holes in the front that when you put the gun in, and the alignment rods went in these 6 holes, 4 on the outside here and 2 here that actually released the mechanism so you could actually program this thing. And then you push the back of the gun forward, those rods pushing forward, and all these holes would set this device. Then you'd remove the gun, close the door, it latched. Of course, if you've been around aircraft, safety wired closed. Everything's safety wired on an airplane. Nothing is just tightened down. It's tightened down, torqued, and then safety wired so it doesn't move. So during that process, from the time I took those guns out of that safe until I put those guns back in that safe, after I'd keyed all the airplanes, me and the Marine would go back down to my ready room, And he would go inside with me the second time and stand on the inside of the door while I opened the safe and returned the guns to the safe, closed the door and spun the dial. At that time, he was dismissed, and he would go back to the armory and turn in his weapons, and then he'd go back to his duty for the day. Now, the one thing that you probably don't understand, this all was going on while we were 1,000 miles out at sea on an aircraft carrier with not another soul around. And one of the funny parts was, he wasn't there just to protect me and the devices from other people. He was there to protect me from those devices, or those devices from me. If I made any movement towards running away while I possessed those devices, if I was going to throw them over the side to a waiting boat, transfer them to another person, share the codes in any way or not, he was supposed to shoot me and then ask why I did that. So that's the way items that were tagged above top secret were treated. Anything above top secret, you get, when you get qualified for that particular device, in this case for me, KY-28s, on top of my top secret clearance was a little tag that said, you're cleared for KY-28s. And we took it very, 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 very seriously. Like I say, if I did any strange stuff with those guns, that Marine would shoot me. And we're doing this while we're out at sea. There should be no non-Navy people there, but there are no chances taken. And there are no excuses made if any of this is not followed to the letter. When it's above top secret, you pretty much get shot. And then later they say, why did he do that? But I spent one cruise of a year and one cruise of 6 months. So I spent 18 months doing this every day. So I thought some of you might be interested in that. And that'll give you a little look behind the scenes at above top secret work. And all of this has now, of course, these devices have been completely declassified. This is a little control box for that particular box. It's got a clear state and a cipher state. You just flip a switch one way or the other, and it's either you're transmitting in the clear or you're not. You can turn it off or on. And like I told you, it has a relay mode where two of them can be used in conjunction to get longer transmissions for aircraft that can't reach the ship or shore without using a radio relay. And this button right here, if you push it, it electrically clears all those sliders in there, all pop to the front, which is exactly what happens anytime you open that door. All right, guys, have a good one.